Thing number three, we're talking CPI, Gary, Consumer Price Index. Thing number three, the CPI is high and a huge relief.
So, Rob, what we saw with the December Consumer Price Index, which is when people talk about inflation, they typically mean the Consumer Price Index. Now, at Deep Knowledge Investing, we will tell you that the CPI is incredibly inaccurate and done so intentionally. It's intended to be inaccurate and it understates inflation. But when people talk about inflation, that's what they're talking about. So, here's what we saw and here's what the market saw. The CPI has risen every month since the Federal Reserve started cutting rates. And the regular CPI, the all items CPI, showed an increase of 2.9% for the last year, which is almost 50% above the 2% target. I will also argue that 2% target is 2% too high. The Federal Reserve's mandate is for stable prices, that's 0% inflation. It was also a 0.4% for the month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but annualizes to just under 5%. That's 2.5 times the target. Now, the market ended up going up huge for the next 2 days after that. So why? Because here I am telling you, wait a minute, the CPI was up, inflation was up, this is a problem. Well, the core CPI, which excludes food and energy, and those prices were up, that was up 3.2%. And the thing that got Wall Street excited was that was down 0.1% from the prior month and 0.1% below the 3.3% expected. Now, I would just point out a few things. One, there is no way the Bureau of Labor Statistics is capable of measuring the price index to 0.1%. This is a rounding error. The other thing is, people like to look at the core CPI because food and energy in particular, tend to be very volatile categories. But I would just point out that if you're an average American, food and energy are actual expenses that you have. And when those prices go up, it's a problem at your kitchen table where, you may sit and do your budgeting for the month. So, a whole bunch of economists in Washington saying, hey, if we exclude all of these things, we don't have much inflation. And the thing that makes me absolutely nutty, because I think it's dishonest, is people are now starting to talk about this super core where they exclude food, energy, and shelter, which is a fancy word for housing, right? So, for all of you viewers who are watching this, put it in the comments and let me know if in the last month any of you bought food, energy, paid the mortgage on a house, or had to pay rent, because those are real expenses. And Caleb Franzen, who's a guy I follow on Twitter and whose work I think is very funny, basically, one time he put a joke where if you exclude everything, inflation is zero, right? If nobody has to buy anything, you have no inflation. So I think Wall Street got a little excited about a meaningless change in a metric that doesn't apply to most people.
Yeah, and Gary, it seems like real solution here is what we've been talking about for months and going on years now, is just the spending out of DC, and talk to our viewers about how critical it is to position your portfolio for what's sure to be more and more coming inflation.
Yeah, Rob, I think that's the key point. We spoke earlier in the show, and we've been talking about this for a couple of years. The Federal Reserve has lost control of inflation. They've lost control of the economy. This was something that we pointed out about 14, 15 months ago in the fourth quarter of 2023. Deep Knowledge Investing put out an ebook called Counterintuitive Inflation, basically saying the Federal Reserve was trapped. And that's where we are now. And that's what we've seen, right? Over the last 4 or 5 months, the Federal Reserve has cut interest rates. And instead of borrowing costs going down, borrowing costs have risen. The 10-year has risen. Mortgage rates have gone up, which is the opposite of what they wanted to happen. So the Federal Reserve doesn't have control. Inflation is being created out because of overspending out of Washington. Now, for the partisans in the crowd, I hate to inform you, this is a bipartisan problem. The Democrats spend way too much. The Republicans spend too much. I know people got very excited about this in the last election. We have a new president as of today. My hope is that President Trump will do something about this, but in his first term, President Trump was also a big spender. I have high hopes that Elon Musk at Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, will do something to cut spending, but that really requires an act of Congress. And so, even Doge, even if Elon Musk makes these great suggestions and President Trump says, yes, I'm on board, those spending cuts have to go through Congress, and Congress has shown an unwillingness to cut their own spending. So basically, what I'm saying is whether the CPI is up or down, we are getting more spending out of Washington. Congress is unlikely to cut it. The result of that is going to be more future inflation. And so, do I think this is a bad thing? Yes, it's a bad thing, but the real solution isn't going to happen. So, make sure your portfolio is prepared for more coming inflation. And, if it's not, if you want help for that, reach out. This is what we do all day, every day. And let me also remind you that at Deep Knowledge Investing, we don't believe in good markets or bad markets. We think that even if there's bad policy, bad money, bad markets, there are ways to make money, and that's what we focus on.